Good afternoon, dear children. Now we are going to continue with the eye, the sense organ. So last class we discussed about the external features and what are the protection given. Now we are going to see the parts of the eye as well as a section of the eyeball and also the various parts. Alright. So mainly our eyeball is having three parts. That is the sclera, which is the outermost layer of the eyeball. The middle layer is called the choroid and the innermost layer is called the retina. So this is the outermost layer called the sclera. This is the middle layer that is called the choroid and this is the innermost layer that is called the retina. So these are the three main layers of a eyeball: sclera, choroid and retina. Alright, these are the three layers of the eyeball. So now let us see what are the functions of each. Alright, now sclera is the white part. Now you can see your eye is the white part of your eye, that is called your sclera. So that is the sclera is the outermost layer of the eyeball. Alright, it is the outermost layer. Now this outermost layer is giving firmness for the eye. So this, when you touch also you can see your eye is firm. That is because of your sclera. It gives firmness to the eye. It's made up of connective tissues. So what is it? Sclera is the outermost layer of the eyeball. It's made up of connective tissues and it is a white part of the eye and it also gives firmness to the eye. So you know what is the meaning of firmness? That means rigidity. That means they are firm. They are not very flexible. That is what is meaning of firmness. So that is about the sclera, which is the outermost layer of the eyeball. And then it is made up of connective tissues. It gives firmness and it is a white part of the eye. So that is the sclera. So this outermost layer of the eyeball is called sclera. Now the sclera is the outermost layer. Then we also have the sclera's front portion is bulged and transparent. So you can see this portion. You can see this portion bulge. That is what in eyes also you can see there's a bulge on your eyes. So that bulge on your eyes is called the cornea. Alright. So the front portion of the sclera is bulged. It's like this. It is bulged and transparent. That means it prevents the reflection of light and allows the light to fall on the retina. That is the innermost layer. That is the function of the cornea. Then we already said about conjunctiva. Conjunctiva produces mucus in order to keep our eyes what? Moist and prevent it from drying. So you can see it is outermost, which is covering all the other parts of the eye except the cornea. This front part of the cornea should not be covered with this conjunctiva because light has to enter into your eye through the cornea. So cornea does not have this layer of conjunctiva because it's a transparent layer through which light has to enter into our eyes. So that this bulge portion is called the cornea. So sclera has a bulge portion cornea as well as it has got the conjunctiva. It is having. Then we'll come to the middle layer. This middle layer is what we call it as, which I put in red color. That is what is called as a choroid. This choroid is a middle layer which contains plenty of blood vessels. That itself means nourishment. So they are having one rich supply of blood vessels. That is the innermost middle layer that is called the choroid. Now the choroid is having in front, it's having a colored aperture. So you can see this portion. This is a continuation of the choroid which is having a colored aperture, that is having a colored part, and that colored part is what we call it as a iris. Alright. So this colored part is what we call it as a iris. Now this iris is given color. So your iris is that brown color in your eye. Namla Krishnamani nu parayile. That is your iris. So that iris is given color according to the melanin pigment. So which is a pigment? Melanin pigment. This pigment imparts color to the iris. So that is why you have seen some people having brown eyes, you are having seen people having blue eyes, you have seen grey colored eyes, isn't it? That is depending upon this particular pigment present in the iris. So iris is a colored part in the choroid region, which is in the color that imparts to the iris is the presence of this pigment, melanin pigment. M-E-L-A-N-I-N. It's a melanin pigment. Then we have, this is an iris. So in between this iris there is a gap. This gap is called, it's an aperture. Aperture means opening. This opening is what we call it as pupil. What is that opening called? Pupil. So this pupil is made up of two types of muscles. That is a circular muscle and a radial muscle. Which are the two muscles? Circular muscle and radial muscle. So these two muscles working only allows that is a functioning of this pupil, that is opening and closing according to the intensity of light is controlled by the circular and the radial muscles. So that is this particular aperture, this gap, this is called the what? It's called the pupil. So iris, and in between the iris there is an aperture, small opening, that is what is called the pupil. Then just behind this we have the convex crystalline lens. Alright, what do we have? Convex crystalline lens. Now this lens also has to be held in position. It cannot be fixed there. So it has to be fixed. So it is fixed by the ciliary muscles and the ligaments. So what is fixing it? The ciliary muscles and ligaments together fixes the lens in position in the eye. Ligaments means tough tissues. Tough means thick. Alright, thick tissues in biology are called ligaments. So ciliary muscles and ligaments together, they are holding this lens in position in the continuation of the middle layer, that is called the choroid. So choroid is having iris, it is having pupil, it is having the lens, and this lens is having ciliary muscles and it is held in position with the help of the ligaments. Alright, and then these muscles, ciliary muscle, and that is depending upon that is the light coming and the functioning of according to the functioning, light entering the function of the lens. The lens increases its curvature or decreases the curvature. So the alteration or it alters the curvature of the lens is increasing or decreasing according to with the help of the ciliary muscle. They help in the what? That adjust the focal length of the lens. That is the function of the ciliary muscles. Then we come to the innermost. You have seen this green color I have given. That's the innermost layer, that is called a retina. This retina contains plenty of photoreceptor cells. So I have already told you, eyes are the organ which has got photoreceptors. So these photoreceptors are present on the retina. Now what are they? We'll see in the next class. So the retina is consisting of photoreceptor cells, the cells which can receive light. Now on the retina we have two spots. Alright. So this region is called, this point is called the yellow spot. Now this is a spot on the retina where you get maximum clarity. If the light falls on this particular point, maximum clarity can be given. Clarity means it will be very clear whatever you want to see. Now we have this point which is called a blind spot. From this our optic nerve emerge. So this is the starting of our optic nerve. At that starting we have another spot called a blind spot. So in this blind spot we have no photoreceptor cells. So that is why, and then blind itself means what? Image will not be formed. If it falls on this, image formation is not taking place. That is why it is called the blind spot. So two spots are there, yellow spot and the blind spot. Then the nerve that emerges from the eye is called the optic nerve. O-P-T-I-C. It's pronounced as optic nerve. This optic nerve carry impulses from the eye to the cerebrum. So we have already studied the cerebrum, the major 85% of the brain. So there we have the vision center. To that vision center, this optic nerve carries a impulse. Then the vision center interprets. That is how you are able to see an object. So that is a retina, which consists of yellow spot, blind spot, as well as the optic nerve. So these are the three important layers of the eyeball. The outermost is called sclera. The front, the continuation of it is a bulge portion called cornea, and outside the cornea we have the conjunctiva, which is keeping our eyes moist, which does not cover the cornea because light has to penetrate through it. Then we have the middle layer, that is called the choroid. The choroid layer consists of iris. Iris is this colored part, which is made up of the pigment, melanin pigment, and in between this iris there is an aperture or a small opening called the pupil, and the pupil is held in position, or it is contracting and relaxing due to the presence of circular and radial muscle. These two muscles, they are, according to the contraction and relaxation, they are contracting and relaxing according to the intensity of the light. Then we have the lens, which is crystalline, convex, and then this is made up of ciliary muscles and ligaments. So ligaments are tough tissues, and then the focus, that is depending upon the light falling, the curvature of the lens is increasing or the curvature of the lens is decreasing. Then we come to the innermost layer, that is called the retina, which is made up of photoreceptor cells, which has got two spots, yellow spot and the blind spot. So yellow spot is a spot where maximum vision can be seen, maximum clarity. And the blind spot is seen where the emergence of optic nerve, starting of optic nerve, and that itself means blind. So no rods, that means they have no photoreceptors, no rods and no cone cells. That is why if light falls on that, the image will not be focused. So it is blind. Then the nerve that emerges from the eye, it's called optic nerve. This optic nerve carry impulses from the eye to the brain, cerebrum, to the visual center. Visual center is interpreting it, and only then you can see an object. So these are the important parts of the eyeball. So for convenience, eyeball is classified to three parts: sclera, choroid and retina. The white part of an eye is called sclera, and the choroid is made up of blood vessels. The layer which contains photoreceptor cells, it is called the retina. So if in your text you have the section of the eyeball, draw the figure of the eyeball, write its parts and also its functions. Alright, so this you have to do today. This is a work for you. You have to draw the section of the eyeball, and then you have to mark the parts and write its functions too. Then we have two fluids in our eye. That is called the aqueous fluid, aqueous humor, and the vitreous humor. So this is the vitreous humor, here is the aqueous humor. These are the two fluids present in our eye. So they are located in two chambers, vitreous chamber and aqueous chamber. So now aqueous chamber is a front part that is in between the cornea and lens. This is a cornea, this chamber is called the aqueous chamber. So this aqueous chamber has got a watery-like material, just like a water. It has got a watery-like fluid that is called aqueous humor. So the aqueous chamber has aqueous humor. So that is a watery-like material, or just like water. So that is called aqueous humor. And the location is in between the cornea and lens. This is a cornea, this is a lens, this is in between. And this is having, or this is a nourishing. The main function is it supplies oxygen and nutrients to the eye. Then we have a very big chamber. This is called vitreous chamber. That is behind the lens. Alright, this is a lens. Behind the lens is a very big chamber called the vitreous chamber. This is having a fluid that is called vitreous humor. So the nature of this is jelly-like material. You have seen jam and jellies, isn't it? So that is a structure of the vitreous humor. That is the nature of the vitreous humor. So it is what? Jelly-like material, whereas aqueous humor is watery-like material. That is just like a water. So these are the two chambers in the eye. That is the aqueous chamber and the vitreous chamber. Aqueous is in between the cornea and lens, and it contains a watery-like substance, watery just like a water, and that is called aqueous humor. And we have a very big chamber just behind the lens, that is called vitreous chamber, which is made up of jelly-like material, which is called vitreous humor. So these are the two fluids, aqueous humor and the vitreous humor. So this two also you have to record in the science notebook. Alright, about the two chambers and the two fluids and its function. Now the function of this vitreous humor is to maintain the shape of the eyeball. The function of aqueous humor for supplying oxygen and nutrients to the eye. And here maintenance of the shape. That means to maintain the shape of the eyeball. So that is the function of the vitreous humor. So these are the two fluids, aqueous as well as the vitreous. Alright. So now you got an idea about the section, the layers of the eyeball. So today after this class you have to draw this figure and then just memorize all the important points as well as the parts, and what are the main parts and what are the other parts coming under each head. So this is very important. Part figure is very important from the examination point of view. Then once we start coming to school, we will just have a dissection. So you can bring a go tie and I'll dissect it in the lab and I'll show you the parts of the eye. Because now we are at home, so we cannot do the practicals. So this practicals we'll do it once we come to school. That is, we'll bring a go tie, I'll cut and I'll show you the parts. I'll show you the jelly-like material, the watery, you can see aqueous, you can see the vitreous, and you can also see the lens, and also through the lens you can read certain things too. I'll show you some material, written material, you can read through the lens. So that practical we'll do once we come to school. So now you just study the theoretical part of the eye. So this is a section of the eye, the main parts of the eyeball and the sub parts along with its function. Alright. So this you have to draw today, and I'll just stop here. Because this itself has saturated your brain, and so slowly just go through once or twice, you go through this video and then you get the words and you get acquainted with these words. Alright. So you have all the spellings in your text. So go through all the spellings, especially aqueous humor, vitreous and all that. Go through the spelling, write it once or twice in your notebook and memorize the spelling. Alright. So we will just stop with this section of the eye. So the next class is how we are able, the chemistry of vision, how we are able to see near objects, how we are able to see far objects. That we will see in the next class. So this is about the section of the eyeball. You have any doubts, you can call me anytime. Okay. Good morning children. Now we'll see the regulation of light. Alright. When large amount of light they fall into the eye, so what will happen? It will damage the eye. So it is not good for the eyes when a large amount of light falls. So we have two parts which regulate the intensity of light, that is the pupil as well as the iris. Alright. So the iris, the aperture in between the iris is called the pupil. So that regulates the amount of light. So now in our text we can see the two figures are given. So look into the eye, the pictures given there. That is the figure 2.2. So now you can see the first picture. You can see the change in pupil in dim light. Dim light means the light is not sufficient. So in the dim light, what happens to your pupil? Your pupil will start enlarging. That means they will start dilating. So they dilate in dim light, and when suddenly light comes, immediately what happens? Our pupil will constrict. Constrict means it decreases. So that is why we say in dim light, the size of the pupil dilates, and then in bright light, the size of the pupil constricts. Constricts means it becomes less. In dim light, it becomes more. In bright light, it becomes less. That is why when you have experiences when you sit in, when the current goes off and you are sitting in darkness. So for some, your eyes have already got adjusted to darkness. Then when suddenly light comes with high voltage, you see your eyes, your eyes start closing and adjusting. So they adjust for a few seconds. So that adjustment is according to the intensity of the light. So it takes some time for the adjustment. So that is what we call it as a regulation according to the intensity of light. So now when we have the two muscles, the radial muscles and the circular muscles, which is maintaining the size of the pupil. So now radial muscles, when they contract, the radial muscles are contracting. They are contracting when in dim light. So what will happen to the size of the pupil? The size of the pupil will increase. So that is the contraction of the radial muscles when during dim light, only then what happens? The size of the pupil increase. That is why when there is less amount of light, your size of your pupil increases. Now when the circular muscle contract, it is when intense light, at that time what happens? Intense light means bright light. At that time what happens to the size of a pupil? The size of a pupil decreases. Alright. So that is what we said, dilating and constricting. So when the radial muscles contract, it is during dim light. What happens to the size of the pupil? Size of the pupil increases. Now when the circular muscle contract, that is an intense light, that is in a bright light, what happens to the pupil size? The pupil size decreases. So this is what we have to know. In dim light, the pupil increases or dilates, and in bright light, the pupil, what does it do? It constricts. Alright. So that is because of the radial muscle contracting and the circular muscle contracting. So when radial muscles contract, it is when it is contracting, dim light. So dim light, more light has to come. So the pupil will be what? It will be dilated. Then whereas when which muscle? The circular muscle is contracting. At that time what happens during intense light? The size of the pupil will decrease. Alright. So you have to note this in your science diary. Now formation of image. So now you can see there is a picture given in a text. So now we know the cornea and the lens, the curvature of the cornea and the lens together, they are only allowing what? The light to get focused on the retina. So it is a cornea, the front bulge part, we have the lens. These two together, they are bringing about, according to the intensity of light and the amount of light coming, their reflection as well as image will be formed on the retina. So the object is getting focused on the retina. So you can see the picture given in a text. So that is figure 2.3. So you can see the tree is here. But see, when the image falls on our eye at the beginning, it is an inverted image. So that is what is called a nature. So it is an inverted image, it is small and it is also real. But after it falls on the retina, this image is taken through optic nerve to the cerebrum visual center. Visual center interprets, then you are getting an erect image of the object and also the actual size of the object. So in the beginning what happens, you can see it is inverted, you can see it's real and also you can see it is small. But once it goes to the brain and comes back, then you get an erect image and you also get the actual size of the object. Alright. So note down in your notebook, that is in your text there is in figure, they have given figure 2.3. So it is an inverted image, it is small and real is already given. So what you have to write in addition, you have to write inverted and also you have to write small. That is peculiarities at the beginning. Then after it comes from the cerebrum only, it becomes actual size and also it will become an erect image. So now we are seeing near and distant objects, isn't it? We are seeing near objects, we are also viewing distant objects. So at that time also we have certain changes taking place in the eye. So now let us see how the focal length of the adjusted by the lens. So now you can see there are two figures given here. You just go through those figures. That is figure illustration 2.2. Now you are looking, first figure is we are looking at a distant object. We are looking at an object kept at a distance. That is a tree. Alright. So at that time, what are the changes in the eye? So the ciliary muscles, you can look at the figure. What happens to the ciliary muscle? They are relaxing when you are looking at an object at a distance. At that time, the ligaments, what are ligaments surrounding the lens? The ligaments start stretching. And then what happens? You are looking the curvature. You can see the lens curvature, it decreases. So naturally the focal length, what happened between this, the image and the object will be more. So the focal length increases. So this is why you are looking at a distant object. So you can see the ciliary muscles, what happened? They are relaxing. What happens to the ligaments? They are stretching. What happens to the curvature of a lens? It decreases. What is increasing? The focal length between the object and the focus is increasing. Now in the second figure, when you are looking at an object which is actually kept nearby, closer, see it's kept near. So at that time you can see what happens, ciliary muscles are contracting. What happens to the ligaments? The ligaments which are stretched, they are relaxing. Now what happens to the curvature of the lens? The curvature increases. What about the distance? The distance is less. That means it decreases. So this is when you are looking at an object kept where? Kept close. So these two tables you have to complete. So they have already given while viewing nearby objects, the ciliary muscles are contracting, ligaments are relaxing. What happens to the curvature of the lens? It is increasing. So what happens to the size, focal length? It decreases. Now when you are looking at an object kept at a distance, at that time what is happening to ciliary muscle? Opposite of this. It is relaxing. The ligaments, what is happening? It is stretching. Then what happens to the curvature of this lens? The curvature of the lens decreases. What is increasing? The distance between the object and the focus is increasing. So these are the two instances when you are looking at an object kept close and looking at an object kept at a distance. So this capacity of the eye to view an object kept at a distance and to view an object kept near by adjusting the eye lens of the focal, by adjusting the focal length of the lens. So this property of an eye is called power of accommodation of an eye. It's called the capacity to accommodate the light. So that is why it's called power of accommodation of the eye. So it is the ability of the eye lens to adjust according to the distance to be viewed. It can view near objects. It can also view distant objects by altering the focal length. So this property of eye lens is called power of accommodation of the eye. So this is how the light is regulated and you are able to see an object. It is the help of the lens. We have the cornea, we have the lens, we have the pupil, we have the iris. Alright. So according to the intensity of light, these changes are made in our eye. So large amount of light when it enters, it will damage your eye. That is why this amount of light falling on your eye should be regulated, and this is done with the various parts of the eye. So with this we complete. That is a regulation, how you are able to see distant object, how you are able to see near object, how you are able, and the property of the eye lens, that's called power of accommodation of the eye. So next class will be chemistry of vision. So with this we complete the regulation and intensity of light. So the amount of light entering into eyes should be regulated, otherwise it will damage the vision or will damage the different parts of the eye. So you can just draw these two tables and this also, which I have already written. So this also you write. This table has to be completed and these points, peculiarities have to be noted in a science diary. So this you do at the end of this video. And you have doubts, you can clarify. Okay.